Good morning, everyone. My name is Roslyn Chavez, and I'm here to tackle about the impact of romanticism. So, romanticism it is an emphasizing inspiration, subjectivity, and the primary of an individual. So, when we say inspiration, it is a creative and pure ideas of an artist. The subjectivity is the based on personal opinions and feelings rather than on agreed facts. So, ang kanang romanticism din no buhaton kay kuan siya kanang imo gyud siya own ideas, imo gyud pure nga idea gyud pa sa maghimo ka sa romanticism. So the romantic style of painting stimulated the emergence of numerous schools such as the Barbizon School of Plein Air Landscapes, the Norwich School of Landscape Painters. So mo na siya ang gi-show sa picture. So when we say Barbizon, the Barbizon is a significant contribution to the establishment of realism in the school. So they were drawn together by their passion and desire to elevate landscape painting. So the Norwich School was started in 1803 by John Croom and his friend Robert Ladbroke on 1770 to 1842. So next is a group of Catholic, German, and Austrian painters, the Nazarene. So, Nazarene, believing in real life, to banal. So, banal, mo na siya ang kanang mga gituhuan ginato, pero di kay siya wala siya originality ba, kuwang siya originality para motuo ka na niya na kanang mga belief sa mga Christians ang mga kuan. So, mo na siya ang banal. So, to portray, they shun it in favor of matters of the spirit and focus on Christian art. So, kani siya nga art, focus din siya sa mga religious arts or mga religious belief. So, the next one is the symbolism like Arnold Böcklin, mo siya nasa picture, 1827 to 1901, and the static movement. So, when we say static, it is an art movement in the late 19th century which privileged the aesthetic value of literature, music, and arts over the socio-political functions. So, ang static di ay mo na siya ang kanang murag nangita sila mga paagi or mga way mo depict or mo mean ngadto sa mga political na mga issues o mga political problems. So, mo na siya ang mga aesthetic movement sa una. So, next topic is, or the next one is, the greatest romantic paintings. So, works of romanticism hang in many of the best art museums around the world. So, here is a short selected list of works. So, ako gipili kay murag tolerant na siya. Tolerant siya gipili kay. Daghan na kay siya ang ato ng mga works kay. So, apilon po tanan murag na akong time sa kuan. So, tulo na lang ako gipili. So, the first one is Carl Friedrich Schinkel, 1781 to 1841. The Gothic Cathedral by the Water, 1813, Staatliche Museen zu Berlin. So, kanang nga picture, it shows an imaginary Gothic cathedral on an island river. Schinkel, o muna siya ang kanang artist, later become a noted proponent of neo-Gothic architecture. So, it is now in the National Art in Berlin. So, kanang nga picture, makita na siya nga to sa Berlin. So, the next one is the John Constable 1776 or to 1837. The Hay Wain 1821 in National Gallery, London. So, Hay Wain, kani nga picture, ang art ni John Constable, it is in the National Gallery in London and shows a typical English countryside scene of the period in summer. So, when we say Wain is an old-fashioned word meaning of a farm cart. So, ang wain di ay mo na siya ang nasa umahan na kanang gitudtud na kanang nailigid. So, mo na siya ang ato, mo na gitawag na wain. So, next is Next is, wait, tignan mo. Next is the J.M.W. Turner. Si J.M.W. Turner. On 1775 to 1851, The Fighting Temporary. On 1838, in National Gallery sa London, gihapon siya. So, The Fighting Temporary is the tone of his favorite piece, pays tribute to England's beloved Temporary against Napoleon forces, showing her glory even on her way to be broken into scraps. So, after being replaced by the modern steamboat. So, when we say steamboat, ano siya ang vapor. So, ano siya example diya sa picture. And so, daghan pa ito na work. So, tro lang sa ako gikuha kay murag wag na nataguras. So, next. The art of realism. From 1400 to 1800, Western art was dominated by Renaissance-inspired academic theories of idealized painting and high art executed in the grand manner. So, grand manner. So, thereafter, caused partly by the huge social changes triggered by the Industrial Revolution, there was a greater focus on realism of subject. So, the term realism was promoted by the French novelist Champfleury during the 1840s. So, the in art means the accurate, detailed, and embellished depiction of nature or of contemporary life. So, ano siya ang realism. So, sa realism pa dahil na topic, although it began in earnest in 1855 with an exposition by the French painter Gustave Courbet on 1819 to 77, after one of his painting, the artist studio had been rejected by the World Fair in Paris. So, na-rejected ay ang work ni Gustave Courbet, ang katong the artist studio, iyang painting. So, si Courbet, nag-set up siya og iyang own nga marke dool sa katong gi-issue nga manifesto katong iyang company sa una mo tong gi-reject. So, ang bago niya karon nga exhibition, mo na siya ang gitawag na Li Realisme or so basa ni Li Realisme. Mo na siya ang bago niya na kanang iya gi-issue bago niya nagibuhat agi exhibit. So, ano ta? Characteristics and subject matter. The style of realist painting spread to almost all genres, including history painting, portraits, genre painting, and landscape. So, example ana dira mo na siya ang landscapes artist went out to the provinces in search of the real France. So, kanang nga picture nag-show na siya na sila sa province. So, nangita sila sa tinuod na lugar sa France. Muna sila nasa picture. So, next is the favorite subject matter for realist artists included. So, muna sila ang mga subject matter. First one is generous scenes of rural and urban working class life. So, when we say urban labor is also addressed by a number of artists. These scenes often reflect the rapidly changing nature of an urban life at a time. So, ang urban labor mo sila ang kanang mga nahitabo gani nga ni-reflect sa kadaadlaw nila nga kanang kausaban sa ilang life. So, mo siya ang urban labor. So, a combination of rural food shortages and the rapid growth of an unskilled urban industrial proletariat in the early 19th century led to an increasing social unrest that erupted across Europe with the Revolution of 1848. So, the second is scenes of street life. So, scenes of street life, kanang mga panghitabo sa mga kilid-kilid sa mga kalsada. So, muna sila ilang gipang draw. Mga senaryo ba sa kanang mga hinihitabo sa mga daplin sa mga kalsada or sa kalsada, cafes and nightclubs, o mga ana, and then increasing frankness in the treatment of the body, nudity, and sensual subjects. So, na-appeal po na sila nga to So next is the realism heralded a general move away from the ideal towards the ordinary and specific style of art. So realism portrayed real people, not idealized types, and the artist felt increasingly free to depict real-life situations stripped of aesthetics and universal truth. So ang gipanghimo dahil sa mga realism ng mga artist, tinuod na mga tao, dili kay mga naalang sa ilang imahinasyon, naalang sa ilang mga kanang gibuot-buot ang nila, pero kinahanglan real people na nagdepict sa real life situation. So mo na sa ang realism. So next will be the realist artist. So doon sila ang mga artist nga na belong sa realism nga mga artist. So it is strongly associated with the 19th century movement. Include the first one artist is Jean-Francois Millet or Millet na siya. Millet, Jean-Francois Millet, 1814 Millet, 1814 to 75. He was a French artist and one of the founders of the Barbizon School in rural France. So, mo na siya. Next is Gustave Courbet on 1819 to 77. He was one of the most remarkable French artists of the Realism movement during the 19th century. Next is the Honoré Daumier, 1808 to 79. He was a French caricaturist, painter, and sculptor, especially renowned for his cartoons and drawings satirizing 19th century French politics and society. So, mo na siya si Honoré Daumier. So, an interesting example of this is the Russian painter Ilya Repin, 1844-1930, produced the Bargimen or the Volga on 1870. So, muna siya ang picture. So, it unflinching portrayal of back-breaking labor. So, you see, unflinching, not showing fear or hesitation. So, di na naman sila pwede magduha-duha. Di na sila, dili ko. So, you need, di na sila kinahanglan pa i-force sa ilang kakuan, pero kinahanglan man nila buhaton. So, di na sila mag-hesitate na moingon na di ko mubuhat ana. So, kinahanglan nila buhaton. So, it depicts 11 men physically dragging a barge on the banks of the Volga River. So, mo ni siya ang kuando sila 11 ka men nga nagdrag sa barge. So, sa Volga, gikan sa Volga River. So, kakapo ano bugata jud kay. So, at the point na sila padung point ana sa ilang kahimtang karon sa ilang kahimtang dira nga picture, nag-show na sila og kanang exhaustion or kanang kapoy na jud kaayo. Di nila makaya kay tungod sa kabugat, tungod sa kainit. So mo na sila makuyapan na siguro sila kanang panahon na siguro. So the next is the realistic style was taken up and adapted by French impressionists like Edgar Degas. Examples, the Absent Drunkard on 1830 to 1900. So in that picture, nag-show in a cafe. Sa cafe na siya. A fashionable meeting place, two men and a woman, although sitting side by side, are locked in silent isolation, their eyes empty and sad. So, a denunciation of dangers of absentee, a violent, harmful liquor which was later prohibited. So, ang kana daing imnon na ilang giinom kanang makahubog ni siya na maayo. So, pagkahuman naman din na ang kana daing imnon di na pwede imnon day sila. Kay bawal na, prohibited na siya nga imnon, pero diha muragi kuan sila ana, muragi violent tigis sila nga paimnon ana nga kanang liquor. So, next is, famous 19th century paintings. Main schools of realism during the 19th century included the English figurative school, the French school led by Gustave Courbet. Sa French school daw, nag-lead si Gustave Courbet. Sa Russian school, si Ilya Repin. Sa German school, si Adolf von Menzel. Ug sa American school, si Thomas Eakins. So, realism in the 20th century, short introduction to a selection of realist schools and themes in 5 art, painting, and sculpture. So, makita ni siya nga to sa Encyclopedia Art History. So, the first one is the Verismo. So, an Italian term implies extreme raw realism without any interpretation. So, So, meron siyang example, Cavaliera Signorini. So, in that picture, so the example is the Cavaliera Signorini on 1835 to 1801. So, after returning home from an extended military campaign, Torrido learns that his fiancée Lola has married Alto, a wealthy wine courtier. In retaliation or in revenge, Torrido romances a young woman named Santuza. So when Lola knows the relationship, she becomes jealous immediately. So muna siya ang story behind that picture. So the second is Ashcan. So on 1908 to 1913, a small group of painters was strove to chronicle everyday life in New York City during the pre-war period. So, example is the producing realistic and unvarnished pictures and etchings of urban streetscapes, and general scenes. So, in that picture, makita mo ang artistic movement in US during late 19th century to early 20th century, portraying scenes of daily life of New York, often in the city's poorer neighborhood. So muna siya dira nasa mga lisod-lisod gani ng mga kabalayan. So muna siya. So the third one is the Precisionism, an American painting movement which depicts the urban or industrial landscapes often in a cubist or futurist manner. So the best exponent of Precisionism were Charles Schiller on 1883 to 1965. So Precisionism is a style of American painting of 1920s and 1930s. So it was characterized by abstract form, crisp outline or form, and static composition, and usually depicting industrial or architectural subject matter. So muna siya ang nasa picture nag-shows. The fourth one is the social realism, 1920s to 1930s. So it describes the urban American scene artist who works during the Depression era. So the example is the best known members Ben Shahn on 1898 to 1969 by Jack Levin and Jacob Lawrence. So in social realism produced by painters, printmakers that aims to draw attention to the real socio-political conditions of the working class as a means to critique the power structure behind those conditions. So muna siya ang social realism. And the social surrealism on 1920s to 1930s, it is a bizarre art form. Surrealism was founded in Paris in 1924 following the publication of André Breton's Manifesto. So it has two broad types of surrealist art So the first one is the fantasy-like paintings of Salvador Dali on 1804 to 1889, René Magritte 1898 to 1967. So, muna siyang nasa picture. And the automatism of Juan Miro on 1893 to 1983. So, makikita na siya sa picture. So, the sixth is the American Contemporary Realism on 1960s to early 1970s. So, it describes the relatively straightforward realistic approach to representation taken by artists in the post-abstract era. So, the famous painter that approves to five arts are William Bailey, Neil Williver, and Philip Perlstein. So, ang ilang gi-approach nga ma-represent sa ilang paintings mo na sila ang represent nila taken artist abstract era mo ni ang painting, sculpture, photography, installation, and performance. So mo na sila ang nag-approve sa kanang five arts. Mo na ang gi-approve sa five arts. And the 7 is the cynical realism in China 1990s. So, a satirical style of Chinese contemporary painting which appeared in the 1990s following the suppression of the Tiananmen Square demonstration. It borrowed imagery from various traditions includes surrealism, symbolism, and classical figure painting. So, ang cynical realism narasagid siya sa China. So, it depicted contemporary So, cynical realism tend to focus on socio-political issues and events since the revolutionary China to the present. So, sa China ra gid siya nag-focus dahil ang cynical realism. So, next is the art of impressionist. So, Impressionism can be considered the first distinctly modern movement in painting. Developing in Paris in the 1860s, its influence spread throughout Europe and eventually the United States. So the key features of Impressionism is the Impressionists loosened their brushworks and lightened their palettes to include pure and intense colors. They abandoned traditional linear perspective and avoided the clarity of form that had previously served to distinguish the more important elements of a picture from the lesser one. The second is the part of the Impressionist idea was to capture a split-second life and ephemeral moment in time on the canvas, the impression. So, ang Impressionism di ay ilagi pa wala kay nilagi pa work ang kanang mga brushwork kani ilalagi minimize ang paggamit og brushworks. So next is the scientific thought at that time was beginning to recognize that what the eye perceived and what the brain understood were two different things. So, sa unod di ay, kung unsa day makit-an sa mata o sa utok na mahibaw-an, kung unsa makit-an sa mata, lahi ra gyud sa utok na mahibaw-an. Lahi ra gyud nga sila nga butang. So, the Impressionism records the effect of the massive mid-19th century renovation of Paris led by civic planner Georges Eugene Haussmann. So, the realist movement championed by Gustave Courbet the first confronted the official Parisian establishments in the middle of the 19th century. So, the exhibitions in Paris and the Salon des Refuses in 1863 at the official yearly art salon, the all-important event of the French art world, a large number of artists were not allowed to participate, leading to public outcry. So the same year, the Salon des Refuses or the Salon of the Refuse was found in response to allow the exhibition of works by artists who had previously been refused entrance to the official salon. So the next is the Edouard Manet and the painting Revolution. So Edward Manet was among the first and the most important innovators to emerge in the public exhibition scene in Paris. So mo na siya ang example kanang iyang paint mo siya na example. So it is that picture was called Olympia. It is the painting of Edward Manet. It was his first exhibited at the 1865 on Paris Salon, which shows a nude woman lying on the bed being brought flowers by a servant. So Olympia was modeled by Victorine Morent and Olympia's servant by the art model Laure. Laure. So man siya. The Post-Impressionism. Post-Impressionism is term used to describe the reaction in the 1880s against Impressionism. It was led by Paul Pisani, Paul Gauguin, Vincent van Gogh, and Georges Seurat. So it rejected Impressionism concerned with the spontaneous and naturalistic rendering of light and color. So the Post-Impressionism extended Impressionism while rejecting its limits. So lahi ra na si Post-Impressionism ug si Impressionism. So sa Post-Impressionism gi-extended niya ang Impressionism while gi-reject ang iyang limitation sa kanang Impressionism. So lahi ra ang work sa Post-Impressionism ug sa Impressionism. So using vivid colors, often thick application of paint. So when you say vivid, it was clear. Nag-use sila og clear nga mga colors. Often thick application of paint. So kasagaran mga baga-baga na mga color ang gigamit or gi-apply. Then real life subject matter. So real life gud siya na gipabuhat. So the expressionist art tried to convey emotion and meaning rather than reality. So mo siya na-express og emotion. Kinahanglan kanang in reality gid siya na expression na iyang i-draw. So by emotion iyang i-draw. So mo siya. So the next is the characteristics of Post-Impressionism. So the first one is the emotional symbolism. As Fry explained, Post-Impressionists believed that a work of art should not revolve around style, process, or aesthetics approach. Instead, it should place emphasis on symbolism, communicating messages from the artist's own conscious. So according to Paul Kizani, a work of art which did not begin in emotion is not a work of art. So, buot pasabot ni Paul Kizani, ang buhat kuno sa art, kung wala nagsugod sa emosyon, dili siya matawag na art. So, kinahanglan maghimo gani og art, kanang by emotion gud siya, kay di man ka makahimo kung siwat-siwat lang ka dira, magdodraw lang ka dira, pero wala kay nahimo na kanang wala kay na mahimo na inspired ka ana nga kanang imong gibuhat na art. Kinahanglan na kay both emotions and feelings nga imong pagbuhat ana nga art. So the second is the evocative color. Purposely employed an artificial color palette was a way to portray their emotion drive, perception of the world around them. So the example of it is the Yellow Christ by Paul Gauguin. So the Yellow Christ is a symbolic piece that shows the crucifixion of Jesus Christ taking place in the 19th century in northern France as Breton women are gathered in prayer. So Gauguin said he chose the color yellow to convey how he felt about the isolated life and pity of the peasants. So muna siya ang color yellow ang gibutang niya and color that ni Gauguin kay nag-convey siya sa unsa iyang na feel about ana nga picture, about na ana nga iyang gi-show sa picture, iyang na feelings ba about iyang sa iyang gi-draw diha. So So when we say peasants, it is a poor person who works on the land. So puno sila ng mga tao dira sa nasa ubos. So next is the distinctive brush strokes. So like works completed in the Impressionist style, most post-Impressionist pieces feature discernible broad brush strokes. So the example is the Bathers by Paul Kizani. So the Bathers, a lifelong exploration of the time-honored themes of nudes in the landscapes. So muna silang gipakita sa mga picture, mga hubo kay sila tanan. So they are both treated as two separate disciplines, but when it's studied together, it can tell the impact to one each other. So mo na siya kanang bisag makita lang ka ng mga picture mo mukuan din ka mo judge din ko unsa man na iya draw unsa man na yung meaning sa iyang draw. So wala sila kahibaw mo judge din sila bisag wala kahibaw kung unsa gimin ana ni Paul Kizani nga nasa picture. So next is the Neo-Impressionism. So Neo-Impressionism is a movement of French painting of the late 19th century that reacted against the empirical realism. So of Impressionism by relying on systematic calculation and scientific theory to achieve predetermined visual effects. So the theory of Neo-Impressionism, the discoveries of optical blending and simultaneously contrast that Surratt read about became the theoretical foundation of chromoluminarism, which came to be known as Neo-Impressionism. So, ang Neo-Impressionism diay mo na sila ang nakadiscover sa optical blending sa mata. So, Michael Eugene Chevreul, he discovered the principle of simultaneously contrast or the effect of color of an adjacent yarn or the perception of the other yarn's color. So, ngano iya man ni nabuhat na kanang principle. Ngano iya man nabuhat na principle? So, here's why. While working at Gobelins Dye Factory in Paris, Michael Eugene Chevreul had to answer customer complaints about the quality of the yarn's color while trying to address the problem. So, na-discovered to niya ang katong simultaneous contrast or the effect of color of adjacent yarn tungod atong customer na nangutana sa iya. So mao to, then he wrote the principles of harmony and contrast of the colors in 1839. So Ogden Rhodes' modern chromatics discuss how the viewer's eye blends or mixes adjacent color, and David Satter's phenomena of vision 1880 established rules for the relationship between the painting and science. So mo to ilang ang ilang kuan na mga principles. So the Neo-Impressionist painters relied on the viewer's eye to blend the colors that appeared on the canvas. So sa eye gid sila nag-focus no sa kanang sa eye nag-focus ang Neo-Impressionist. So Ogden Rhodes' modern chromatic discuss how the viewer's eye blends or mixes adjacent color. So si Ogden mo ito siya ang nag-discuss sa mga viewers sa mata kung saan nag-blend, kung kayon sa nag-blend or gimix ba. So si David Satters mo ni siya, he's a phenomena of vision, established rules for the relationship between painting and science. So si David Satters mo ni siya ang nag-establish kung unsa ang relation between sa painting and science. So si David Surratt, he applied color theory and the new technique that he called balayé, a criss-crossing strokes to apply matte colors in his 1884 Bathers of Asnieres, a monumental works that depicts a number of women bathing in the river on the hot summer day. In 1890, Surratt published Statistique his foundational work on New Impressionism scientific color theory. So muna siyang example di sa picture muna siya ikam. Muna siya. So next, by the 1890s, the influence of New Impressionism was waning, but it was important in the early stylistic and technical development of several artists of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including Vincent van Gogh, Paul Gauguin, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, and Henri Matisse. So, lesson 3. So, the topic of lesson 3 is the from the age of symbolism to expressionism. So, art in the 20th century, like the social environment in which it was produced, underwent a process of constant and rapid changes. Strauss Electra represented a move toward expressionism, and the transformation of late 19th century chromatic tonality, and this trend was continued in Schoenberg's Earthwortong, based on free atonality expressionism and symbolic meaning. So si Strauss Electra nagrepresent siya sa expressionism ngadto sa 19th century. So next is si Serge Wozzeck. He discussed the symbol of the oppressed and the peak of expressionism. So muna siya si Serge Wozzeck. So, symbolism. Symbolism was both an artistic and a literary movement that suggested ideas through symbols and emphasized the meaning behind the forms, lines, shapes, and colors. So, muna sila ang kanang mga symbols. So, it can also be seen as being at the forefront of modernism in that it developed new and often abstract means to express psychological truth and the idea that behind the physical world lay a spiritual reality. So, symbolists could take the ineffable, such as dreams and visions, and give it form. So, pwede sila magdamgo or makita sila sa ilang makita sila on sa future. So, matagan nila og kanang story ang ilang arts. So, symbolism in the visual arts had its sources in early 19th century Romanticism's emphasis in the imagination rather than reason. So, the first evident in the writer Charles Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal, 1857. So, ang symbolism, tawag ako giingon na magkuan ra sila sa dreams or sa damgo para makahatag sila og kanang may makatag sila og kanang mga nice na mga arts. Wala lang sila nag-base sa mga reasons, but nag-base sila sa mga dreams or visions or sa ato pa pangitain. Cherries. So, William Blake, an aestheticism of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, England, and he included the personal vision and poet. So, at the poetic, allegorical, moody dream worlds created by three na sila kabuok ng mga artist, si Edward Burne-Jones, Gabriel Rossetti Piari, o si Puvis de Chavannes. Kumbahan sila ng mga artist. So, symbolist and theory, and Albert Aurier. So, in 1891, Albert Aurier wrote in what became essentially a symbolist manifesto, and that art should be ideste or ideative, or expressing an idea; symbolist, since it expresses that idea through form; synthetic, since it expresses those forms and signs in a way that is generally understandable; subjective, since the object is only an indication of an idea perceived by the subject; and 5 is the result. It will also be decorative, since decorative painting is at once an art that is synthetic, symbolist, and ideative. So, gi-combine na si decorative. So, concepts and styles. The period in which the symbolist work was marked by confusions regarding moral, social, religious, and intellectual attitudes. So, an interest in the occult was related to this concept, as was a taste for the morbid and perverse, as this period is often described as one of decadence. So, English writer Oscar Wilde's works and the French writer Juris Carl Huysmans' A Remorse Against Nature, 1884, as well as the art of many of the symbolists reflect this decadence. So the most important art of the symbolist is Death and Mask by James Ensor. So next is the Art Nouveau, an ornamental style of art that flourished between about 1890 and 1910 throughout the Europe and United States. It is characterized by its use of a long, sinuous, organic, and was employed most often in architecture, interior design, jewelry, and glass design, posters, and illustrations. So Art Nouveau developed first in England and soon spread to the European continent, where it was called Jugendstil in Germany, Secession Stil in Austria, Stil Floreal in Italy, and Modernismo in Spain. So the term Art Nouveau was coined by a gallery in Paris that exhibit much of this work. So the history of Art Nouveau. The term Art Nouveau stemmed from the name of the Parisian art gallery called La Maison de l'Art Nouveau, owned by the avant-garde art collector Siegfried Bing on 1838 to 1905, which showcased works created in the Art Nouveau style. So the Art Nouveau style in Belgium was promoted by Les Vingt and La Libre Esthétique. In Germany, popularized and promoted by a magazine called Jugend, Münchner Illustrierte Wochenschrift für Kunst und Leben. In Austria, it was popularized by artists of the Vienna Secession movement, leading to the adoption of the name Secession Stil. So the characteristic of Art Nouveau. There is no single definition or meaning of Art Nouveau, but the following are distinguishing factors. So wala dyan meaning sa Art Nouveau. So Art Nouveau philosophy was in favor of applying artistic designs to everyday objects in order to make beautiful things available to everyone. No object was too utilitarian to be beautified. So, the Art Nouveau saw no separation in principle between fine art and applied or decorative art. So, wala siya kalahian between sa mga arts or lain-lain ng mga arts. So, in content, the style was a reaction to a world of art which was dominated by the precise geometry of neoclassical forms. So, Art Nouveau remains something of an umbrella term which embraces a variety of stylistic interpretations. Some artists use new low-cost materials and mass production methods, while others use more expensive materials and valued high craftsmanship. So, mo to siya. So, thank you for listening. By the way, I have a meaning of an art. So art is just as often an expression of scientific knowledge to make a great deal of creativity. So ang art daw, mura na siya nag-express, mura na siya og science nga mura kag nag-invent, experiment, pero ang art naagid siya own creativity sa imong kaugalingon para ma-show nimo kung sa imong ideas or imong emotions or imong mga idea na gusto nimo i-form or i-make sa imong true arts nimo gibuhat. By making sa kanang arts, makahimo ka ana nga mga butang. So arts can be everywhere or shown everywhere, but it could be good kung na kay meaning ana behind that picture, kinahanglan na kay anay na kay gimin ana nga imo nga gi-drawing or gi-portray nimo na kanang arts, na kay o nimo nga meaning ana behind that picture na ay meaning ana. So mo lang to. Thank you for listening.